we know that that kind of sacrificial love is what Jesus is talking about. That kind of love would feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, would put clothes on those who don't have clothes, would invite a stranger in. But I wonder if it goes beyond this, beyond that. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to happen. I don't know, but I'm just wondering if this is going to happen. I wonder if when the Lord Jesus comes and we are standing before Him in His judgment, if He will say, just in the same way in that Bible passage that Jesus said, I was the one that was sick. I was the one that was in prison. I wonder if Jesus will say, I was that woman at the checkout counter that you got frustrated with and you spoke sarcastically to. I wonder if He'll say, that was me. Or that young kid that cut you off in traffic and you flew off the handle and you swore at them. I wonder if Jesus will say, that was me. Or how about I was that person that was of a different ethnic group than you, that had a different nationality, and you claimed that you weren't prejudiced against, but I knew your heart. And you were prejudiced. And that was me. You were prejudiced against me. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I wonder. I wonder if Jesus will say, that person at church that you don't get along with, that you shun because you don't want to talk to them, I wonder if Jesus is going to come back and say, you were shunning me. Why didn't you love them with the love of Jesus? Why don't you love them the way that I love them? Well, I need to tell you a story. Just happened this Thursday. This Thursday evening, I was driving on the way back from visiting a friend of mine from Next Generation, and he and I had spent much of the afternoon together and early into the evening. And I was on my way home from his house, and it had gotten dark. Of course, it gets dark around 7 o'clock nowadays, unfortunately. It had already gotten dark, and I was driving home, and I've got one of those cars. Many of you probably have them now too. These newer cars have very bright headlights. Any of you have that? And those are my dim lights. So something that happens to me very often, and it might happen to some of you too, people will flash their lights at you. I see some heads nodding. They think that your bright lights are on, so they flash their lights. Say, your brights are on. And what I often do is I'll just flash my bright lights real quick, on and off. And I'm not being angry. I'm just saying, these are my dim lights, really. These are my dim lights. Well, the other night, this happened. It's not something new, but I was coming home from talking with a friend of mine. I was driving home, and this guy turned his bright lights on to tell me, your bright lights are on. But he kept them on. He just turned his bright lights on, and he was saying, hey, pal, why don't you take some of this? You got your bright lights on, and it's not very cool, and it's blinding me, so here, you take some of this. And he left them on. And I was immediately turned into a rage. And I got so angry, and I turned my bright lights on. And I said, what do you think about that, pal? And I kept it on. He kept his lights on. And when he passed, I flicked my lights off, and I was angry. And I said, what And I stopped, and immediately the Lord brought to my mind this sermon that I'm going to preach this Sunday. And the words that came to my mind was, I was the person who flipped their bright lights at you. And you swore at me in your mind. You didn't love me with the love of Jesus. And immediately, I just started praying. I said, God, forgive me for this sin, I pray. Help me love people the way that you love people, this sacrificial way. And friends, I know it's not easy, but that's what God's calling us to do. It's so easy to love our church family because we've known each other so long. We are family, and we're brothers and sisters in the Lord. It's so easy for us to love our immediate family and the friends that we have that are like-minded. But this kind of radical love that Jesus is talking about is a love that goes beyond that. It's a love that says, I'm going to love people who aren't very nice. I'm going to love the people of this world. And that's what God is calling us to do. Look with me again to Matthew chapter 25. This time, I'd like to go up a few verses, and I'd like to start reading in verse 14. Here we see Jesus is picking up the conversation started in verse 20, and what he's talking about is the kingdom of heaven. 25 verse 1 rather, where that discussion begins. So again, he's talking about the kingdom of heaven, and he says this, Matthew 25, starting in verse 14. He says, "Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who calls his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to their ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. And after a long time, the master of the servants returned and settled accounts with them." Verse 20, it says, "The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. 'Master,' he said, 'you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more.'" And then we get to verse 21, a very familiar verse in the Bible. It says this, "His master replied, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness.'" Now, how many of you have ever heard someone say, "I am waiting for the day that I will meet my Maker and hear those words, 'Well done, good and faithful servant'"? Have you ever heard anyone say that? Sure, I've heard people say that before. I'm waiting for the day when the Lord will welcome me into glory and say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." I'm reminded of the words of a song. You've probably heard it on Christian radio. It's a popular song right now. Very few verses. It simply says, "I want to hear you say the words to me, 'Well done.' I want to hear you say, 'Good and faithful servant.' I want to hear you say, 'I've prepared a place for you. Let all the treasures of this world fade away.'" Then it says, "Jesus, you are my reward. To hear your voice on that day is all I'm living for. Jesus, you are my reward. To see your face on that day is all I'm living for." And what a